Welcome back to GH Spoilers channel. Today we will learn about the issue that has left Port Charles in complete shock and disbelief. The latest episode of ABC General Hospital has delivered one of the most dramatic and heart-wrenching storylines of the season, with consequences that will reverberate throughout the community for months to come. Kristina's fatal mistake. In recent episodes, viewers witnessed the escalating tension between Kristina Corinthos Davis and Ava Jerome. Their relationship has always been complicated, but their latest confrontation pushed Kristina beyond her breaking point. During a particularly heated argument, Kristina's emotions spiraled out of control, and in a moment of blind rage, she conceived a deadly plan to eliminate Ava once and for all. Driven by vengeance and unable to think clearly, Kristina made her way to the parking garage with murderous intent. Her target was Ava's car, and her plan was simple yet lethal: sabotage the brakes, ensuring that Ava would lose control of the vehicle and potentially meet a tragic end. In Kristina's mind, this would solve her problems permanently, removing Ava from her life without direct confrontation. However, fate had other plans. In her haste and emotional state, Kristina failed to verify which car actually belonged to Ava. This critical oversight would lead to devastating consequences that no one could have anticipated. The car she tampered with wasn't Ava's at all. It belonged to Rick Lansing, former district attorney and a significant figure in Port Charles with connections to multiple residents. Rick's tragic end. Completely unaware of the danger that awaited him, Rick entered his car the following day and drove off as usual. It wasn't long before he made the horrifying discovery that his brakes weren't responding. Despite his best efforts to control the vehicle and avoid disaster, the inevitable occurred. Rick's car careened out of control, resulting in a catastrophic accident that claimed his life instantly. The news of Rick's sudden and violent death spread quickly throughout Port Charles, sending shockwaves through the community. For many, it seemed like a terrible accident, a random tragedy that could happen to anyone. But for Kristina, who soon learned of Rick's fate, it was a moment of horrifying realization. Her intended target had been spared, while an innocent man, someone connected to her own family, had paid the ultimate price for her vengeful actions. The weight of what she had done hit Kristina with crushing force. Not only had she committed a terrible crime, but her carelessness had resulted in killing the wrong person. The guilt and remorse that flooded through her were overwhelming, yet she remained silent, paralyzed by fear of the consequences and the knowledge of what her actions had wrought. The investigation begins. As with any suspicious death in Port Charles, the police department quickly launched an investigation into Rick's accident. Initial forensic examination of the vehicle revealed that the brake lines had been deliberately tampered with, transforming what appeared to be a tragic accident into a potential homicide case. This discovery immediately elevated the priority of the investigation and brought in the department's best detective, Dante Falconeri. Dante, known for his thoroughness and commitment to justice, began methodically collecting evidence and interviewing potential witnesses. His investigation led him to review security footage from the parking garage where Rick's car had been parked. What he discovered would shake him to his core: clear video evidence showing his own half-sister Kristina tampering with Rick's car the day before the accident. For Dante, this revelation created an impossible situation. As a dedicated police detective, he had sworn to uphold the law and bring criminals to justice, regardless of who they might be. But Kristina wasn't just any suspect. She was family, the daughter of his father, Sonny Corinthos. The conflict between his professional duty and family loyalty presented Dante with perhaps the most difficult moral dilemma of his career. Dante's difficult decision. After hours of internal struggle and consultation with his superiors, Dante made the painful decision to follow the evidence where it led. With a heavy heart but unwavering commitment to his oath as a police officer, he obtained a warrant for Kristina's arrest. The scene that followed was emotionally charged as Dante arrived at Kristina's apartment, finding her in a state of distress and guilt-ridden anguish. When confronted with the evidence, Kristina initially attempted to deny her involvement, but the weight of her actions and the irrefutable video evidence made her position untenable. In a moment of emotional breakdown, she confessed everything to Dante: her fight with Ava, her plan for revenge, and the terrible mistake that had cost Rick his life. Through tears, she explained that she never intended to hurt Rick, that her target had been Ava all along, but this did nothing to mitigate the severity of her actions in the eyes of the law. With profound regret, Dante placed his sister under arrest, reading her rights as tears streamed down both their faces. The arrest of Kristina Corinthos Davis, daughter of the notorious Sonny Corinthos, would soon become the talk of Port Charles, dividing loyalties and testing relationships throughout the community. Sonny's intervention. News of Kristina's arrest reached sunny Corinthos with the force of a hurricane. Known for his fierce protection of his children and his extensive influence both within and beyond the law, Sonny immediately sprang into action. His daughter, regardless of what she had done, would not face this alone, nor would he allow her to suffer the full consequences of the justice system if he could help it. Sonny's first move was to secure the best legal representation possible. He reached out to Diane Miller, his longtime attorney and one of the most formidable legal minds in Port Charles. Despite the overwhelming evidence against Kristina, Sonny insisted that Diane find any possible defense or loophole that could help his daughter avoid a lengthy prison sentence. Simultaneously, Sonny began leveraging his less legitimate connections, seeking to influence the investigation, tamper with evidence, or pressure witnesses. For Sonny, the end justified the means when it came to protecting his family, and he was willing to cross any line necessary to ensure Kristina's freedom. This approach, however, placed him on a direct collision course with his son Dante. The conflict between father and son intensified as Dante remained committed to conducting a fair and thorough investigation, while Sonny employed increasingly desperate and questionable tactics to derail it. This family schism added another layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. Ava's reaction. When Ava Jerome learned that she had been the intended target of Kristina's deadly plan, her initial reaction was one of shock and disbelief. The realization that she had narrowly escaped death by mere chance, that it could have been her in that car instead of Rick, left her profoundly shaken. Ava's complex personality came to the forefront as she processed this information. Part of her felt a vindictive satisfaction in Kristina's predicament, seeing it as karmic justice for the attempt on her life. Another part experienced genuine fear, recognizing how deep Kristina's hatred ran and wondering what other enemies might be plotting against her. But perhaps most surprisingly, even to Ava herself, was the emergence of an unexpected emotion, empathy. Having made numerous destructive choices in her own life, some of which had resulted in tragedy for others, Ava found herself in the unusual position of understanding Kristina's impulsive action. She recognized the pattern of a rash decision made in anger, leading to unintended and irreversible consequences, a pattern all too familiar in her own life story. This conflicted emotional response led Ava to make an unexpected decision. Rather than pursuing vengeance against Kristina or using the situation to her advantage, she chose to remain relatively neutral, neither advocating for harsh punishment nor offering forgiveness. This uncharacteristic restraint from Ava puzzled many in Port Charles, leading to speculation about her true motives and whether this might signal a genuine evolution in her character. Ripple effects throughout Port Charles. The death of Rick Lansing and Kristina's subsequent arrest created ripples that touched nearly every corner of Port Charles society. For Molly Lansing Davis, Rick's daughter, the tragedy was twofold. Not only had she lost her father in violent circumstances, but she discovered that her own cousin was responsible. This betrayal within the family left Molly torn between grief, anger, and confusion, unsure how to process such a complex emotional trauma. Elizabeth Weber, who shared a complicated history with Rick as his ex-wife, found herself unexpectedly affected by his death. Despite their troubled past, Rick had been an important figure in her life, and his sudden absence reopened old wounds while creating new ones. Elizabeth's compassionate nature led her to reach out to Molly, offering support during this difficult time and creating an unexpected bond between them. Alexis Davis faced perhaps the most challenging position of all. As Kristina's mother and Rick's ex-wife, she was caught in an impossible situation. Her legal background gave her a clear understanding of the serious charges her daughter faced, while her maternal instincts drove her to protect Kristina at all costs. Additionally, despite their complicated relationship, Alexis mourned Rick's death and felt a responsibility toward Molly, creating a web of conflicting loyalties that threatened to tear her apart. The legal community of Port Charles also found itself divided over the case. Some, like Scott Baldwin, argued that Kristina's actions constituted premeditated murder, regardless of who the actual victim turned out to be. Others, including Martin Gray, suggested that the case might better fit the definition of involuntary manslaughter, given that Kristina had no intention of harming Rick specifically. These legal debates spilled over into public discourse, with citizens taking sides and expressing strong opinions about what justice should look like in this unusual case. The hospital staff's dilemma. At General Hospital, where many of the involved parties worked or had connections, the atmosphere became tense and uncomfortable. Dr. Elizabeth Weber found herself in the difficult position of working alongside Alexis and interacting with members of the Corinthos family while grieving Rick. The professional requirement to maintain composure while dealing with such personal turmoil tested her emotional resilience. Dr. Patrick Drake and Dr. Robin Scorpio Drake, who had worked with Rec on various legal matters related to the hospital, found themselves processing their own complex feelings about his death. Their medical training had prepared them to deal with death, but the violent and preventable nature of Rec's passing affected them deeply, particularly his parents themselves, who understood the impact on Molly. Epiphany Johnson, the head nurse known for her no-nonsense attitude and moral clarity, became an unexpected voice of reason amidst the chaos. Without taking sides, she reminded her colleagues of their professional obligations to provide care without judgment, while also acknowledging the very human emotions that such a situation evoked. Her steady presence provided a stabilizing influence in an environment fraught with tension. Kristina's internal struggle. Behind bars at the Port Charles Police Department, Kristina faced the darkest period of her life. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by the crushing reality of what she had done and the consequences she now faced. Alone in her cell, she replayed the events in her mind countless times, torturing herself with thoughts of what might have been if she had checked the car more carefully, or better yet, if she had never given in to her vengeful impulses at all. Visits from family members brought both comfort and additional pain. Alexis arrived with legal advice mixed with maternal concern, her eyes reflecting both love for her daughter and disappointment in her actions. Michael, Kristina's brother, offered unconditional support while gently encouraging her to take responsibility for her choices. Each interaction forced Kristina to confront different aspects of her crime and its impact on those she loved. Perhaps most difficult were her own reflections on her relationship with Ava and the hatred that had driven her to such extremes. In the quiet solitude of her cell, Kristina began the painful process of examining her own capacity for violence and the ease with which she had justified potentially taking a human life. This introspection led to profound questions about her character, her values, and whether redemption was possible after such a grievous mistake. As days turned into weeks, Kristina's emotional state fluctuated between despair, self-loathing, and occasional glimpses of hope that she might someday find a way to atone for what she had done. The journey towards self-forgiveness, she was beginning to realize, would be far more difficult than facing the legal consequences of her actions. The legal proceedings begin. As Kristina's case moved toward trial, the legal maneuvering intensified. Diane Miller, representing Kristina, filed motions to suppress the video evidence, arguing that the surveillance had been obtained without proper authorization. The district attorney's office, determined to prosecute the case to the fullest extent, countered with arguments about public spaces and reasonable expectations of privacy. Preliminary hearings drew media attention and public spectators, turning the Port Charles courthouse into a circus-like atmosphere. Reporters clamored for statements from family members, while ordinary citizens debated the case in coffee shops and on social media. The high-profile nature of the case, involving both the Corinthos family and the former district attorney as victim, ensured that every legal development became front-page news. Behind the scenes, Sonny continued his efforts to influence the outcome through less legitimate channels. Rumors circulated about potential jury tampering, witness intimidation, and even attempts to plant evidence that might create reasonable doubt. These activities placed additional strain on Dante, who suspected his father's involvement but struggled to prove it without compromising the case. Alexis, despite her legal expertise, found herself unable to officially participate in her daughter's defense due to the obvious conflict of interest. Instead, she channeled her energy into researching precedents and developing strategies that she passed along to Diane, while also providing emotional support to Kristina during this difficult time. Unexpected alliances and betrayals. As the case progressed, surprising alliances began to form among the residents of Port Charles. Molly Lansing Davis, despite her initial anger toward Kristina, found herself advocating for a compassionate approach to justice. Having studied law and believing in principles of restorative rather than purely punitive measures, she spoke publicly about forgiveness and rehabilitation, shocking many who expected her to demand harsh punishment for her father's killer. Conversely, some who had initially supported Kristina began to distance themselves as details of her premeditated plan emerged. The calculated nature of her actions, regardless of the mistaken identity, caused some friends and acquaintances to reassess their loyalty and support. These shifting allegiances created additional emotional turmoil for the already fragile Kristina. Perhaps the most unexpected development came from Ava Jerome herself. After weeks of silence on the matter, Ava requested a meeting with Alexis, during which she offered to testify about the nature of her conflict with Kristina. While her testimony wouldn't exonerate Kristina, it could potentially provide context about the provocative and threatening behavior that had pushed Kristina to such extremes. This offer left Alexis suspicious of Ava's motives but desperate enough to consider any help that might mitigate her daughter's sentence. Meanwhile, Jason Morgan, Sonny's right-hand man, conducted his own parallel investigation into the circumstances surrounding Rick's death. His findings, which he shared only with Sonny, suggested that there might be more to the story than a simple case of mistaken identity. These revelations would eventually lead to a dramatic twist in the case that no one saw coming. The community divided. As weeks passed, the citizens of Port Charles found themselves increasingly divided over the Kristina Corinthos Davis case. The division wasn't simply about guilt or innocence. Few disputed that Kristina had tampered with the brakes, but rather about the appropriate consequences and the complex factors that had led to her actions. At Kelly's Diner, a longtime community gathering place, heated debates broke out regularly among patrons. Some argued that Kristina's status as a Corinthos should not entitle her to special treatment, while others pointed out the mental health aspects of the case and the need for rehabilitation rather than pure punishment. These discussions often became personal, with longtime friends finding themselves on opposite sides of an increasingly bitter divide. Local churches and community organizations attempted to promote healing through various initiatives. Father Coates organized prayer services for Rick's soul and for strength for all those affected by the tragedy. Community counseling sessions were offered for those struggling to process the complex emotions stirred up by the case. Despite these efforts, the polarization continued, reflecting deeper divisions within Port Charles society. The media coverage only exacerbated these tensions. The Port Charles Press, under the direction of editor Peter August, published impreciously sensationalized accounts of the case, often with a slant that portrayed Kristina in the worst possible light. In contrast, local blogger Maxie Jones offered more nuanced perspectives, exploring the psychological and social factors that contributed to the tragedy. These competing narratives further confused public opinion and intensified the community discord. Sonny's desperate measures. As the trial date approached and legal options dwindled, Sonny Corinthos became increasingly desperate to protect his daughter. His initial attempts to influence the case through conventional means had proven less effective than hoped, leading him to consider more extreme measures. In a private meeting with Jason Morgan, Sonny floated the idea of breaking Kristina out of custody and arranging for her to disappear to a non-extradition country where she could start a new life under a different identity. Jason, usually loyal to a fault, expressed rare reservations about this plan, pointing out the additional legal jeopardy it would place Kristina in and the lifetime of looking over her shoulder that would follow. When Jason's caution failed to dissuade Sonny, Carly Corinthos intervened. In an emotionally charged confrontation, she reminded Sonny of the importance of allowing Kristina to take responsibility for her actions as part of her growth and healing. She argued that running from consequences would only compound the damage to Kristina's psyche and prevent her from ever truly coming to terms with what she had done. This intervention temporarily halted Sonny's most extreme plans, but he remained determined to find some way to minimize his daughter's suffering. His attention turned to potential legal technicalities and procedural errors that might provide grounds for dismissal or significantly reduced charges. The trial begins. The trial of Kristina Corinthos Davis versus the state began on a rainy Monday morning, with the courthouse surrounded by media, protesters, and curious onlookers. Inside, the courtroom was packed to capacity as Judge Rawlings called the proceedings to order and the selection of jurors began. The prosecution, led by ambitious Assistant District Attorney Madison Brooks, presented a straightforward case. Kristina had deliberately tampered with a vehicle's brakes with the intent to cause death. The fact that she had targeted the wrong person was irrelevant to the charges of first-degree murder, Brooks argued, citing the legal principle of transferred intent. When someone intends to harm one person but accidentally harms another, the original intent transfers to the actual victim. Diane Miller's defense strategy focused on Kristina's mental state at the time of the incident. Without denying Kristina's actions, Diane presented evidence of prolonged psychological manipulation by Ava Jerome, expert testimony about impulsive decision-making in young adults, and Kristina's genuine remorse and lack of prior criminal history. Her goal was not acquittal, but rather a reduction in charges from murder to manslaughter, which carried a significantly lighter sentence. As witnesses took the stand, the human drama of the case unfolded before the transfixed courtroom. Dante Falconeri testified with professional detachment about discovering his sister's involvement, though observant spectators noted the emotional toll it took on him. Forensic experts confirmed the deliberate nature of the brake tampering, and character witnesses for both the prosecution and defense painted contrasting pictures of Kristina as either a calculating criminal or a troubled young woman who had made a terrible mistake. Ava's surprising testimony. The most anticipated testimony came when Ava Jerome took the stand. As the intended target of Kristina's actions, her perspective carried particular weight with the jury. The courtroom fell silent as Ava was sworn in, with spectators and participants alike wondering which version of this unpredictable woman would appear, the vindictive enemy, or the surprisingly empathetic figure she had occasionally shown herself to be. Ava's testimony began with a frank acknowledgement of her contentious relationship with Kristina and the Corinthos family generally. She admitted to numerous conflicts and even to making threats that could have been perceived as serious by someone in Kristina's position. While not excusing Kristina's actions, Ava provided context that humanized the situation and made the escalation seem more understandable. Most surprisingly, when asked directly by the prosecutor whether she believed Kristina deserved the maximum penalty for her actions, Ava paused thoughtfully before responding that she did not. "We have all made terrible choices in moments of anger," she testified. "Though few of us face such devastating consequences, I cannot say what justice looks like in this case, but I know that Kristina Corinthos Davis never intended to harm Rick Lansing, and that fact should matter." This unexpected show of empathy from Ava created a stir in the courtroom and became a turning point in the trial. The prosecution had counted on Ava's testimony to cement their portrayal of Kristina as a cold-blooded would-be killer. Instead, her nuanced perspective introduced doubt about the appropriate level of punishment, if not about Kristina's actions themselves.